3 rings for the elven kings under the sky. 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone. 9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
Hail, everyone! Hail, Internet! We had some issues there. Sorry about that. StreamYard was doing its like, hey, are you sure you want this free version? Because we could upgrade. I'm like, no, get out of the way. I'm trying to get on the live stream. All right, anyways.
Are you sure?
Are you sure? I'm like, yes, I'm sure.
All right. Are you doubly sure?
No, apparently not. All right, anyway. Hail, Internet. Great to see people already out there. We've got Mark, and we've got Shelby, we've got Robert, we've got our good friend Thomas is out there as well. So awesome. All right, so welcome everybody. Today we are doing the third and final section of the Council of Elrond. We've made it to the end of the exposition.
Finally.
Finally. A quick summary. Last time we learned about the history of the ring, the sword that was broken, and Gollum's capture and subsequent escape. In this section, we're going to learn about Gandalf's unfortunate meeting with Saruman and hear a debate about what should be done with the ring. I actually remember during my very first read-through of the Fellowship of the Ring, maybe age 12, something like that, the debate passage really excited me because you had all these characters whom I took to be, heroes of Middle-earth, Glorfindel, Eristor, Galdor, and they all had these conflicting views of how to proceed. And some of those discarded views actually sound pretty reasonable, or they did at the time. I'm like, actually, I'm not sure we should dismiss this, but so
they are.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that. But with that short summary out of the way,
Mark
Joe and Dan, feel free to take us through in more detail, gentlemen.
Okay, but first, Mark is mocking me because on the Eleanor Zhang stream I did a while back, I actually recited the ring verse in the Dark Speech with the Ajnazg Duba.
Oh, okay.
Ajnazg Gimbatul Ajnazg Thrabatuluk Ag Bezumishi Krimbatul.
Well played.
That should tide him over till the next time.
Okay. Very good. And yes, Frediger would have done it in the Dark Speech. However,
he suffered no consequences.
He wasn't invited to the council. It's the biggest oversight. It's like a wedding planner, and you didn't get the invite to get him seated next to the right people. So sorry, Frediger. All right. So take us through, good sir.
All right. Last time we made it all the way up to page 256 in the I'll say the Black Book edition, like I would with the Robert E. Howard completed edition I have over there, which is the hardcover copy here. I forget which edition this is. There's so many editions.
It would be 336 for mine.
Okay.
I am using the Kindle edition. Anyway, but yes.
All right. So let's see. We have Gandalf, who was in the Shire at the end of June, and no, not that slow detail. Well, not that slow going, right? Let me just consult my notes real quick. Yeah. So the thing is, he got the idea to go seek out Saruman and basically report in, consult, and whatnot. Now, first things first, he ran into Radagast, which Yeah. Now, Radagast the Brown has had dwelt at one time, it said, in Rosgobel, near the borders of Mirkwood. And apparently Gandalf had not seen him in some time. And Radagast, it was who informed him Saruman wants to speak to him. And, of course, Gandalf is telling him the 9 are abroad. No, wait, that would be Radagast who told Gandalf. And, of course, the fact that Radagast knows this and has been keeping tabs on them is pretty neat and impressive. And I'm not sure how much they knew about this. Like, if they actually knew Radagast was tracking them. I don't think they know, because I like to think Radagast is pretty competent at what he does.
I agree. And this is our only real, we're not even learning it in real time, because this is Gandalf talking about a conversation he had with Radagast. But this is really our only introduction to Radagast in the trilogy. And so this is a pretty important little, like, oh, wait, you mean there are other wizards? This was a kind of a bit of revelation to me. Again, in that first reading, I'm like, oh, wait, okay, there's a whole society. Who knew at that point how many there were? As we know, there are 5, but at the time, meeting Radagast suggested there might be this giant pantheon of wizards walking around in Middle-earth.
And of course, the boss of all of them is Saruman. Now, Saruman at this time is still known as Saruman the White. Or as some will call him, Saruman the European, but it's white European semantics. I couldn't resist that joke. But
good call, Napdragon. Yeah, I think we are reminded of Radagast a bit.
Yeah,
there as well.
I think he is mentioned by Beorn in The Hobbit.
Well, one of the interesting things I wanted to point out real fast in the text is when Gandalf is describing Radagast, he describes him as he says Radagast is, of course, a worthy wizard, a master of shapes and changes of hue, and he has much lore of herbs and beasts, and birds are especially his friends. That master of shapes and changes of hue is a really interesting little caveat to put on him, because we know him as, okay, he's friends with flora and fauna. He's like a druid, essentially, in a way. But the master of shapes and changes of hue suggests almost like an illusion style thing, or there's a new power set on him that I don't think I would have necessarily associated with him at the time. But it's an interesting association to make.
We got to bear in mind, Gandalf is a spirit of hope, and Saruman uses his speech more than anything else to influence people. So if we look at this as not like maybe the majority of the magic that's done in Lord of the Rings is almost more influence over the natural world.
Right. It's not, casting.
It's not like
level 3 fireball. Yeah, I got you.
Well, technically, I'm just saying.
I mean,
technically, Gandalf did kind of do that a few times.
Yeah.
But like, it's not like, oh, I'll use gate and open up a portal for a giant pirate ship to appear.
Yeah.
There's none of that nonsense. Now, I love that in D&D, but it is nonsense in the context of Lord of the Rings.
So no opening gates, just plaid fireballs.
That's right. Exactly.
Like Fizzban would do in our 1RP. That was years ago, but that was a great moment. Let's see.
So I'll just mention too, then, the one particularly important, I think, line in this description of the conversation is where Gandalf says, and he doesn't realize at the time how important it's going to be, but when he says to Radagast leaving, like, oh, great, Saruman told me to talk to you, I'm out. And he's like running away, essentially. Like, stay a moment. We shall need your help, and the help of all things that will give it. Send out messages to all the beasts and birds that are your friends. Tell them to bring news of anything that bears on this matter to Saruman and Gandalf. Let messages be sent to Orthanc. And I mean, that's basically the way that Gandalf escapes eventually. Little did he know he's just asking for messages to be sent to Orthanc. He didn't realize he'd be a prisoner at the time. So a very fortuitous little communication there.
Well, he probably should have left the message with Cinderella or Snow White. They'd have been faster. Sorry, I just have to throw that Disney reference in there because I am thinking of those adaptations where the woman seemed to be like Radagast and have this connection with animals. So, anyways, apparently stayed the night in Bree and decided that, there was no time to return to the Shire. And he wrote a hurried message to Frodo and trusted that Butterbur would, deal with that. And went off to go visit Isengard. And not Isengard, but he went to visit Saruman. And this proves oh yeah, it is Isengard. But this proves a bit of a disaster because Saruman's not really on his side anymore. And of course, he welcomes him with the words, "So you have come, Gandalf." And Gandalf admits, "I've come for your aid," and whatnot. And this is where we don't know how Saruman would have traditionally greeted him, but I doubt it would be this rudely, where he just seems to scoff and sneer.
Well, if you remember the conversation that I referred to in the last episode we covered, where it was a conversation that had happened years earlier where Gandalf was kind of taunting Saruman about the ring, blowing smoke rings, and all that happened years before this conversation. And it does make me think, like, the implication is that Gandalf would have had at least some idea that Saruman wasn't completely on his side walking into this moment. I don't know if maybe Tolkien's viewpoint on that changed over time, and maybe when in the initial drafts here it was like, oh, he legitimately thought, I'm just going to see my buddy Saruman, or if maybe there was, he was a little more there was a little more guile to it, and he was hoping to get the help while not inciting the the anger or the betrayal of Saruman. But ultimately he walks in and Saruman traps him.
And what's now real quick, we also know that this is near the Gap of Rohan, near between the Misty Mountains and the northern foothills of Ered Nimrus, the White Mountains. So I forgot about that detail.
Joe was just making Gandalf's description of Radagast always seems pretty underwhelming to me. Master of shapes and changes of hue. Oh boy, maybe he's really got his sharpening pencils too.
Yes, he also does that on the weekends.
He's very good at that. I want to actually, you brought up Radagast again. There is one question about what was the ultimate fate of Radagast. We're not told necessarily in the book, but we do get in Unfinished Tales, we get a couple of lines that I think are, instructive. One says, "Indeed, of all the Astari, only one remained faithful, and he was the last comer, for Radagast the Fourth became enamored of the many beasts and birds that dwelt in Middle-earth, and forsook elves and men, and spent his days among the wild creatures." Then it goes on to say that Saruman fell from his high errand, becoming proud and impatient, enamored of power, sought to have his own will by force, and to oust Sauron. And it goes through that, and then it follows with a little poem. There's a little poem at the end of this, and the one line that's interesting from that is it says, "Only one returned, others never again under men's dominion." So what it's suggesting is, because we know Gandalf returned to the West, if you take, obviously what's canon, but if you take this as some kind of a pseudo canon, the Unfinished Tales, it's suggesting that Radagast did not return and maybe stayed in Rosgabel, stayed in the East.
Yeah, what I'd say is we should probably take it as canon, but I will say the conversation between Saruman and Gandalf, if it contradicts the lore of Lord of the Rings, then it's not.
Yeah.
And But like, what do I know? Like, well, either way, Radagast is pretty rad. I've been waiting to use that pun.
Well, good, cool that Nap Dragon brings up the Master Shapes could suggest that he shapeshifts maybe into beasts, and then that also brings up the Beorn idea. We mentioned that actually Nap Dragon mentioned that Radagast is mentioned by Beorn. Maybe there's a similarity there.
Yeah, and of course, Saruman goes on to mock Radagast, calling him the bird tamer, the simple, the fool, and that this has been a trap for Gandalf. Like, he's really showing his hand a little too soon, and he tells him he is that, for I am Saruman the wise, Saruman ringmaker, Saruman of many colors, and of course his robes are now a disco ball. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just,
or a circus tent. Who knows? Yes.
Yeah, a circus tent. It's like, or clown hair. Maybe we should stick that on Saruman. I mean, he decides to shed. Well, he seeks power beyond just a white, and
that leads to one of my favorite lines that Gandalf says, maybe in the whole trilogy. But
I liked white better.
Exactly. This whole that paragraph is great.
Mm.
Yeah, go for it.
Saruman has a great rejoinder. White, he sneered. It serves as a beginning. White cloth may be dyed. The white page can be overwritten, and the white light can be broken.
And here it comes. Here comes the bang bang.
In which case it is no longer white, said I. And he that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom.
Awesome. That is an awesome line. I love it.
It's one of the best lines in the entire.
I've actually used that that mantra in my life at times. Like, yeah, good. Let's don't break this to fix it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and in day-to-day life, it is relevant in that. Well, you look at politics. You look at like, even to an extent, history. You look at philosophy. You look at a lot of things in life. If you break something just to understand it, you've destroyed something. Now, just to play a bit of devil's advocate, there are times when what you're breaking has no real value, so there's reason to break it. But that is not what Saruman is doing. Saruman seeks to do what the the likes of Robespierre from the French Revolution did. He sought to break the 1,000 to 50, it'd be 1,200 years of tradition there, just to understand and just to play out being a god. But like, you look at that's breaking something just to understand it. And even, I would argue, to an extent, Napoleon kind of did this, but not to the same extreme. And the trouble is, once you've broken a thing, you can't just, put it back together. And that is ultimately the problem with Saruman's philosophy. He wants to break the white so that he can dabble in everything and have access to everything.
And then maybe he's morally. Well, actually, this is interesting. Joe showed us a quote here with the white light can be broken. The phrase makes you think of Isaac Newton play with his prisms. That morality wise, that maybe the purity of I am morally, I'm a moral person, and then you break into a prism of moral turpitude, perhaps.
Like, you look at, you look at all sorts of people throughout history. Like, I'll use a non-sensitive topic. Lafayette from the French Revolution. He's a popular guy with the Americans. But the thing is, when he went back to France, he brought his understanding of liberalism with him and whatnot. But the idea was this broke the monarchy. But the thing is, you broke the monarchy, which was the core, which was almost at the heart of France. But, you've got the problem that Louis Seize was a really nice guy, and France was doing well enough. Like they didn't need to go for the economic difficulties they did under the revolution, and we know that now. And Louis and his entire family were butchered because Lafayette couldn't keep his mouth shut and whatnot. So, and then Lafayette, for all that he claimed to be a hero, abandoned his family later when the revolution went foul and abandoned them to die. But they didn't die. They tracked him down, and apparently his wife was very angry with him. So this is something which, like he broke what was like a white light to better understand it, and what came out of it wasn't pure.
Interesting. I had not heard that side of the Lafayette story. All right.
Yeah, he's actually infamous as a coward and a traitor in
Wow.
French history.
All right.
Selling out the royal children.
Yeah, he sold them out, and then he abandoned his own kids to the revolution, and his wife escaped by the skin of her teeth to rejoin him. And he had tried to all fleet back to America again and abandon her again. But, then he lived for a time in, I think, Germany or something, or Austria, and eventually went back to America, then went back to France and died in France. But the thing is, he also helped to betray Napoleon in France, so that he was never really loyal to France. So, like, in American history, he's this great rescuer to you guys, but to the French, he's this great, like, he's Saruman. You know what I mean? Like,
Wow,
he's this
Chronic
heavy
backstabbing
words.
disorder.
Yeah,
I mean, in Georgia, we've got there's a city named after him, but of course they call it Lafayette. You're not going to be going to Lafayette. You got to play the anyway, that's funny.
But yeah, like, this is where you see, with Saruman, it's really the lesson, I think, of you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
That's a good call.
Yeah, because this is a great line by Nolan, and his writers, Jonathan Nolan and David Gwaihir. They did a great job with that line, and it's very true.
And the way you pronounced Lafayette, it did sound like the word Lafayette
In French. Oh, nice.
which is translated to the failure.
Oh, Shelby is, because she is from the South as well. So she says, yes, we have a county in Mississippi pronounced Lafayette also. Yes. All right. Very good. The South has difficulty pronouncing that name. But there you go. Lafayette.
Well, in the South's defense, they at least have that drawl. So we French immediately excused them.
I can put that on and off. I kind of I can install it and take it away. But, if I'm talking to my dad, I might jump it back in. Anyway.
So Lafayette was a Judas Lowe or a Benedict Arnold to us Americans, of whom
Right.
Okay.
So, all right. So one thing you mentioned when you were describing Saruman's, turn when he's the many colors, he also says in there, "I'm Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker."
Yeah.
And we get another quote slightly earlier than that says, "But I rode to the foot of Orthanc, came to the stair of Saruman, and there he met me and led me up to his high chamber. He wore a ring on his finger." That's Gandalf's specific. Not obviously the fact that he mentions it. It's not just like, he was just had some costume jewelry.
Yep.
So I think we can gather from that. We don't have, direct evidence, but we can gather from that Saruman is tinkering with the power to make rings.
Either
we know that,
or he's met someone.
Or he's met someone. Yeah. We know even from earlier in this chapter, there's a bit where Galdor talks about, what of Saruman? He has learned the lore of the rings, yet he's not among us. What is his counsel? And we know that's Gandalf's clue. It's like, wait, Saruman was talking about like inscriptions on the ring. How did he know about that? Then that inspires him to go to the library, find the scroll that Isildur wrote. We know later on that Saruman found Isildur's body and was hoping to find the ring. Didn't find it. But so he's obsessed, I think, with the ring and how to make it. He's a crafter. He's a servant of Aule. So he's designed some rings. Now, we don't know how powerful they were. I assume they had some effect. He's a worthy Maiar.
Real quick, I didn't know Shelby was also a francophone ou française canadienne. Yeah. Okay. There's a lot
Oh,
of you.
very
on the
nice.
Gulf Coast.
I'm a French Canadian heritage. I didn't realize that. All right. Oh, good point. Yes, living where you do on the Gulf Coast, that makes sense. All right.
Yeah.
Very
Also,
nice.
yeah, Dan and I are French Canadians, so we're probably Frencher than you. I'm joking.
Why you mentioned to me before we went on here that you might be heading to France to study.
Yeah, to the motherland.
Very
La
nice.
Mère Patrie, which is a term some of us, at least where I grew up, we still called it La Mère Patrie. A lot of my ancestors are originally from Quebec. Same. I think for Daniel and I, it's like 70% of to like more than that went through the Saint Laurent region to reach where they are and where we are in Ontario. So that like I'm not trying to demean your family, Shelby, or do a comparison. It's just a lot of families that are French Canadian, like even in other areas of Canada, go through Quebec.
Yeah,
my
and-
my great grandmother spoke mostly French. Unfortunately, language died with her. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Être français, c'est la meilleure chose au monde. It's a gift. You were blessed with French.
Yeah, because I know that through our paternal line, we have a lot of family on the Ile des Allumettes.
And well, the Loire Valley.
Oh, Tiki points out. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Was himself
But
wearing?
Gandalf was wearing. Right. Good point.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to talk about later because there's a great moment where Glowin is asking the council, like, well, what about the elven rings? We could use those to help us. And Elrond saying, like, well, we can't really talk about that. Sorry. And it's like the two of the three rings are literally 5 feet away from Glowin when he's asking. But
two real things. Tinky has a great avatar because Nosferatu. And I think with Gandalf saying, like you're breaking, I wonder because Saruman broke from the white light that I don't want to say channels, but like that is very important as a bit of a source of power for him. And I wonder if he had to break that light internally in order to go with many colors. But there's something that Saruman doesn't think about, and it's that if you darken and keep coloring with too many colors, it eventually just becomes black. And that's basically what he's become. He's become Saruman the Black in a way. And we assume Saruman didn't even know Gandalf had a ring. I think right under his nose.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I would agree that Saruman likely did not know that Gandalf had the ring of fire. I'm going to mention real quickly a little bit about Orthanc, just because we're introduced to it briefly here, and we're told a little bit more about it actually in the Two Towers, and so I'll mention that quote. But basically, this is a work that was made by the Númenóreans in Gondor. So it was, what does it say here? This is from the Silmarillion. These were the chief dwellings of the Númenóreans in Gondor, but other works, marvelous and strong, they built in the land in the days of their power. At the Argonath, at the Aglarond, and at Erech, and in the circle of Angrenost, which men called Isengard, they made the pinnacle of Orthanc of unbreakable stone. And then we get this kind of a better description of it. Spoiler alert, the Two Towers, when we're covering this, which I'm sure next week we'll be talking about this chapter from the Two Towers. It says, to the center, all the roads ran between their chains. There stood a tower of marvelous shape. It was fashioned by the builders of old, who smoothed the ring of Isengard. And yet it seemed a thing not made by the craft of men, but riven from the bones of the earth in the ancient torment of the hills. A peak and isle of rock it was, black and gleaming hard. 4 mighty piers of many-sided stone were welded into one. But near the summit, they opened into gaping horns, their pinnacles sharp as the points of spears, keen-edged as knives. Between them was a narrow space, and there, upon a floor of polished stone, written with strange signs, a man might stand 500 feet above the plain. This was Orthanc, the citadel of Saruman, the name of which had, by design or chance, a twofold meaning. For in the elvish speech, Orthanc signifies Mount Fang, but in the language of the Mark of old, the cunning mind.
Which is fitting for Saruman.
Correct.
Because in world building, the location can also be used as a kind of background in a way to the character himself. I know that on the face of it, that sounds like an obvious statement, like a duh. But on a more metaphorical or figurative level, I know there's a big meme about, well, the curtains are just blue because they are. But actually, no, they aren't. The blue curtains tell us about the character. Let's say, for Mansfield Park, Fanny. If there are blue curtains in a room, it tells us something about Fanny. We have to associate like the idea of wisdom and truth or harmony with, or regality with Fanny. So, like, the thing is, us knowing this many names and the meaning of the names or whatever of Orthanc, like what it means in every language, tells us a lot about Saruman, who is Lord there.
Also, just mention that when you say cunning mind, one of Saruman's names is Kuranir. It's one of his maybe original names, and that is a man of skill. In other words, a skilled one. So again,
a skilled
the name
one
almost suggests his own name. So yeah,
it's hinting at him. It's talking about him, and like I find it very funny how a lot of I don't really spend much time with a lot of comic book people anymore. Superhero comics and whatnot, because eventually I got irritated with the conversation to an extent. More because when you say, well, the Batcave, what does it say about Batman? They could launch themselves into like, well, it says this about Batman or that. But then the minute you say, what does Orthanc say about Saruman? They get impatient, restless, or like, what about the curtains? Like they'll get impatient, say, who cares? Well, how come you can apply that literary theory to Batman, but not like Jane Austen or Tolkien here? So I'll just say that, and I just need to get that off my chest.
All right.
But yeah,
a little patience required. I got it.
Yeah, Isengard is Saruman in a way, because it's these locations are not divorced from the characters. Like Angband tells us a lot about Morgoth, his vision of the world, what he's like, who he is at his core. Just as Amon tells us a lot about, for example, the various Valar. And if you look at Teniquetil, that tells us a lot about Manwë. Mandos, the realm, tells us about Mandos. Radagast the Brown's little, I don't want to say hobbit hole, but his home tells us a lot about him.
Sure. I mean, Bombadil, I'm sure his house says a lot about Bombadil, for sure.
Yeah.
And in a story like this, you've got to remember that the location is as much a character as the characters in the story.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And so there's something dark and looming and intimidating about Orthanc. And this attention to this sort of detail is something I really appreciate about Tolkien. And I think it's something of an almost lost art in literature with a lot of writers today. There are a lot of them that are relearning this art, but there was a brief time when it seemed like it was utterly lost. And I'm currently reading a indie author's book where David V. Stewart, he has a humongous YouTube channel, and shout out to him. I'm reading one of his first books, and it's amazing. But he starts by going into a lot of detail on just his, I think, female lead, and about her grandfather, who's already dead by the beginning of the story. But we learn a lot about the grandfather, and that's detailed to her in like the house I think she lives in, and that tells me a lot about her. So
Tinky is asking, which king gave Saruman the keys to Isengard? You're right, it was in the Third Age. It was after the Siege of Helm's Deep. and I believe it was Baron, who was a steward at the time. It's in response to the Dunlendings being defeated, and Saruman, who was kind of plotting for that control of that the entire time because he wanted the Palantir,
and this
gets the castle or gets the tower.
And this is something where Peter Jackson's film does a good job telling us, the stewards are lesser men of the kings of Gondor. And while there were some stewards who were pretty good, they are decidedly far lesser than the legitimate kings. And what about Finrod? He built 3 towers.
Right. I think Mark is asking maybe what does that say? What do those kingdoms he built say about Finrod? I would agree that it's instructive as to the character of Finrod, the places that he helped design and craft.
Now,
the interesting bit here we get is we get another dream. We get Frodo's dream, a reference to Frodo mentions, "Oh yeah, back in Tom Bombadil's, I saw you on top of Orthanc." You being Gandalf. And Gandalf says, well, let me just read that real fast. It says, "I saw you," cried Frodo. "You were walking backwards and forwards. The moon shone in your hair." Gandalf paused astonished and looked at him. "It was only a dream," said Frodo, "but it suddenly came back to me. I'd quite forgotten it. It came some time ago after I left the Shire, I think." And then Gandalf says, "Then it was late in coming," said Gandalf. "As you will see, it was an evil plight. Those who know me will agree that I have seldom been in such need and do not bear such misfortune well." So it's interesting. Frodo has a dream of Gandalf on top of the tower, but that dream actually happened after. It wasn't a real time dream. He's dreaming that like a week after Gandalf actually got rescued. And so it's a little odd. Like, why would he have a past tense dream of Gandalf? And my only reasoning for that might be it not being in real time. The dream comes when he gets to Tom Bombadil's house, which is on that the Withywindle River. He's in the care of Goldberry, the river daughter. If we go with the idea that Ulmo, Lord of Waters, is inspiring these dreams, that could have been maybe the earliest occasion, on the journey that Ulmo could have reached Frodo, perhaps, in a dream state. Is like Tom Bombadil's house was kind of the perfect place to be the receptacle for dreams. And so maybe he was having a dream that Ulmo had intended for him to have, a week earlier, perhaps, when it was actually happening. But I don't know. Just a thought on my part.
Yeah.
But
now, I like part of Saruman's speech that he rebuts Gandalf with. And suddenly he says, "And listen, Gandalf, my old friend and helper." It's like you went from insulting him and saying, "Yeah, I'm totally against you," to now saying, "Come on, old buddy, old pal, old friend, old buddy." It's like, Saruman, you've already blown the lid on this. But he says, "I said we, for we it may be, if you will join with me. A new power is rising. Against it, the old allies and policies will not avail us at all. There is no hope left in elves or dying Numenor. This, then, is one choice before you, before us. We may join with that power. It would be wise, Gandalf. There is hope that way. Its victory is at hand, and there will be rich reward for those that aided it. As the power grows, its proved friends will also grow, and the wise, such as you and I, may with patience come at last to direct its courses, to control it. We can bide our time. We can keep our thoughts in our hearts, deploring maybe evils done by the way, but approving the high and ultimate purpose, knowledge, rule, order, all the things that we have so far striven in vain to accomplish, hindered rather than helped by our weak or idle friends. There would not be any real change in our designs, only in our means." Now, first off, to dissect this a little, a new power is rising, and that by that he couldn't be speaking of. Now this is a dual speech right there. I think he's talking about on the face of it, Mordor. In reality, Isengard. And what's interesting is that he says there's no hope left in. Oh, before that, he says against it, the old allies, that is to say, the last alliance, and which itself was a renewed alliance that arguably began in the days of the First Age under the auspices of the likes of Fingolfin's reign, when a lot of men, I believe it's the Attain, ended up serving as liegemen, or at least not liegemen, but huscarls, household warriors and guards and whatnot, under the supervision of the House of Fingolfin. Now, the Fingolfinian alliance was also transferred over to, in a more official capacity, the Feanorians under Maethros, who did forge a grand union. So this is a great callback, but policies. Now, this is where we get a fundamental difference that Tolkien does comment in a few of his letters between Saruman and others. So, like, how we should regard it is, I think, Maethros never looks at things like policy in a way, nor does Fingolfin think in those terms, really. Because policy is like something that a politician or like a republic or something might say, well, we've got this long-term policy idea. Even kingdoms might have that. But the thing here is Gandalf doesn't think in terms of politics. He thinks in terms of what needs to be done to complete the mission, to stop Sauron. But we have here a fundamental difference between Saruman and Gandalf. Saruman is thinking like a warlord and a politician, whereas Gandalf is thinking more like, well, a leader. And there's a profound difference between a leader and a politician. For one thing, one is naturally treacherous, and for another, the other is someone who has an obligation to what he has to do. Saruman only reveals his treachery then, but he was evil for at least 200 years, from what was said in the Council of.
Right, exactly. Yes, he was. Well, he was certainly hiding the ball and looking for the ring himself, and he was avoiding confronting Sauron and Dol Guldur. He was telling the council he should wait. So yeah, he was definitely he wasn't on team good guy.
No,
for a long time.
He was a Toronto Maple Leaf, not a Montreal Canadian.
Okay, fair enough.
My dad's hockey terms.
All right, all right.
Pardon me.
Indeed, Joe. A good unexpected, but yes, I certainly meant that as a Palantir pun. Okay, so we get Saruman imprisons Gandalf atop of the tower. Then because
there's also the I really like
do your thing.
Of I just really like his talk of dying Numenor.
Didn't mean to interrupt. Go for it.
Because sorry about that. It's just the dying Numenor thing, because we usually think of Numenor as having been long dead because of what happens in the Second Age with the Numenorians wanting to basically defy God.
The island is gone, but the people survived, or some, those few boats that came across.
And people are the culture, is what someone's recently told me. So, like, the French people are what generated the French culture, or you've got, American culture is generated by Americans and whatnot, like that sort of thing. And it's a really interesting philosophical point. And I think that, like Numenor remained alive in a manner, in a philosophical and I guess ethnical sense, with the Numenorians having founded Gondor and Arnor, even as the island basically was long dead. But I don't tend to look at the Gondorians and Arnorians as Numenorian, I tend to think of them as, yeah, okay, I know Aragorn is of Numenorian descent, but I tend to think of him as Arnorian or Gondorian. You know what I mean? It's one of those really interesting sentences which reveals that Saruman looks at the people of Gondor and Arnor as Numenorian, which is probably a little more accurate than how I've been thinking about it. It's just I tend to think Numenor.
And to someone of his age, right? Since he's so old that the idea that culture's come and gone, you know, within his lifespan. So he doesn't. He thinks of them as pre and and post.
Yeah, but that being said, has the Numenorian culture died? Because like there's still their civilization in place via Gondor and Arnor. It's like the whole Roman argument with Eastern Roman Empire or the Greek Empire of the medieval period. Did Rome disappear? Well, yes, in the West to a limited extent, but in the East, it certainly didn't. It just evolved, adapted, and became ever more Greek.
Sure, and in Britain, obviously the Romans certainly up and left, but their culture certainly lingered on. They'd already it was already intermarried. There were people who were Roman, but they weren't Roman.
I will disagree about Britain and say it died out there. That's why I went full Anglo-Saxon and back to paganism. But in France,
I'm just saying, okay, I hear you, but just to say, even now you've got remnants of Rome that people uncover to this day. And roads they were still being used.
Yes.
The trappings of Rome, the walls were still being used. Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
Silly me.
There were remnants of the empire. I get it.
Yeah, I was wrong. Yeah.
I get you. You're right. In some ways, it was like there was a lot of tech when Rome left that probably could have been put to good use. That maybe wasn't. But that being
said, like you look at later centuries, a lot of the later Anglo-Saxon kings, like Ilfrid and Aethelstan and whatnot, looked at themselves and tried to aspire after the Romans. So, in a way, Rome evolved and became an idea? So, like, did it really die out in Britain? Well, maybe for a time, but it came back.
And I certainly think at least part of the inspiration for Numenorians certainly had to have been Romans in Tolkien's mind. Rome and Britain.
Gandalf though comments that he has heard such speeches before, but usually only in the mouths of emissaries from Mordor. And what's funny is that, of course, Saruman is not happy, and of course, Gandalf suddenly realizing we're not on the same side. And they, Gandalf, as you pointed out, gets locked up in the clinker, to use a more modern parlance. And an elf friend. Hello. It's been a while.
Awesome to see an elf friend in the chat.
I think the Normans could have claimed to be the true inheritors of Rome. From Think Yuki. Well, I'll say this. It's through the French connection that the Normans made that claim, because they were, and through their conquest, just conquering everything. That was certainly a certain Roman attitude. But the French kingdom liked to claim that it was an heir to Rome through Clovis after his baptism. And the Normans claimed a connection to that because they were half French, half Viking. So there is certainly a decent claim there, I guess. When the Western Roman Empire line fell, this is what caused the following period to be called Dark Ages, because technology declined for a long time. The Romans were ahead of the times. Yes.
Yep.
But it also caused hyperinflation, and it took several centuries of before the currency deflated back to.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I watch a lot of archaeology shows. I'm a big fan of those.
Fun.
And one of the tropes, essentially, of archaeology in Britain is you've got there's a group of folks that enjoy doing the Roman archaeology. Let's find a Roman villa. Let's find a Roman temple. Oh, look, here's the Hypocaust tiles. But then there's a section of archaeologists who find that almost that work is too easy. And they are really into Anglo-Saxon because there is nothing. There's very little in the soil to tell you that something is an Anglo-Saxon settlement. They use a lot of wood. They use mud and daub. So you find essentially you find post holes, but they're not holes. They're just darkened circles in the earth. And if you have a trained eye, you can go, that darkened circle in the earth is the remnants of a giant wooden post. Hence, this was an Anglo-Saxon settlement. But it shows you the difference between Rome was building things out of stone, stuff that was meant to last. And Anglo-Saxons were basically trying to survive day to day. What can I do to quickly build a village here out of what's at hand, easily wood? Anyway,
under the circumstances, you can look at what the Frank, the Visigoths, and the Anglo-Saxons were doing, and see that there was wisdom to it. Because, you don't have access to the same everything of Rome.
Yep.
Adapt. Although, arguably, now that I think about it, the Visigoths did carry a lot of knowledge, actually, I should say, forward. It's just that during the Conquista by the Moors, all of that was wiped out, and Spain had to start over with, what was it, 2 or 3 or 600 Visigoths in Asturias and start over.
I like the idea of an empire of Daves, by the way. Well done.
Let me see. The Davision Empire.
I like it. Okay, so just get us back on track.
Okay. I have to understand Davision.
Gandalf is trapped on top of the tower. An interesting thing happens. So first, Gwaihir arrives. Thank goodness. Gandalf said, "Hey, Radagast, send me messages." So Gwaihir arrives with news, and can say, "While you're here, maybe you could save me." But while the conversation is going on, Gwaihir says something interesting. So Gandalf asks, he says, "Are the men of Rohan still to be trusted, do you think?" I said to Gwaihir, "for the treason of Saruman had shaken my faith." "They pay a tribute of horses," he answered, "and send many yearly to Mordor, or so it is said, but they are not yet under the yoke. But if Saruman has become evil, as you say, then their doom cannot be long delayed." So that's interesting. Whoa, okay. So from Gwaihir, you're learning that Rohan is sending tributes of horses to Saruman, or to Sauron. But the next line is Aragorn then taking that in, and Boromir's the one who says that's crap. That's not true. So Aragorn said, "Then he must be a noble beast indeed," talking about Gwaihir. "And it grieves me more than many tidings that might seem worse to learn that Sauron levies such tribute. It was not so when last I was in that land, nor is it now, I will swear," said Boromir. "It is a lie that comes from the enemy. I know the men of Rohan, true and valiant, our allies, dwelling still in the lands that we gave them long ago." Now, and I think that's true. I think Boromir is right in this.
Yeah, I agree. I was only going to say real quick, David, the Trojan thing was debunked because the Franks are descended from the Trojans, not the British. Everyone knows this. I'm joking. I couldn't resist this joke. I had to study this sort of stuff in school. But anyway.
So it's just interesting that Gwaihir is basically perpetuating. He doesn't know it. He thinks it's true, but there's a lie that he is. You would think that Gwaihir might be more like the words coming from Gwaihir's mouth are true. You can take them as gospel, but we're here. Okay, there's actually some fallibility to the rumors that are going around the land.
What's interesting is that Aragorn immediately basically blackpills and says, "Well, darn, we're screwed then without Rohan." And Boromir says an interesting statement, which you point out, which he's basically saying, "Don't blackpill." The men of Rohan, they would never surrender without a fight. They would never pay tribute to anyone. This is a mean-natured lie. I refuse to believe it. But he does say one thing that I don't think the Rohirrim would completely agree with. Dwelling still in the lands that we gave them long ago. which suggests, the sentiment of it's still ours. We're just kind of loaning it to them, or we gave it to them.
I mean, they did give it to them, but I hear what you're
They-
saying. Like he's
but I
mentioning, like, hey,
I would argue that, well, they did,
there's
but
a
they didn't.
hierarchy, and maybe we're higher than they are.
Yeah, but I would say they kind of didn't. In that, could Gondor really have prevented Rohan from taking those lands?
I think the answer is, well, not that they would have prevented them, but I don't think that Rohan had much interest in those lands because they were so far north at the time. They were like, hey, you can come here. Here are some better lands for you if you'd like them, in honor of you saving us.
I just mean Rohan was headed in that direction, was going to take it.
I got you. You think Rohan might have been powerful enough to? I never thought of that possibility. I suppose
because Gondor was not strong enough to.
I'll put it this way. I don't think what turned out to be the Rohirrim, the Northmen, the Aotheod, would have attacked Gondor. No. I don't think that was in them to do it. So I'm not sure that was ever really like a threat necessarily.
I think there is like a thin possibility, but I'm looking at this as nations and tribes.
I got you.
But I think that it's wise policy on the part of the Gondorians. It's kind of like how do I put it? It's kind of like you're resettling, like you're basically creating a buffer kingdom. And if we look at it as, say,
he definitely was like a buffer kingdom for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like, you look at the giving up of Spain to the Visigoths under the Romans. I'm not trying to always go back to the Romans. It's just I think about them every day. I'm joking. That's such a meme. But the thing is, giving up the Iberian Peninsula to those tribes was a good thing because Rome couldn't keep it anymore. And trying to was overstraining the resources. So give it to a tribe to keep them loyal. Like it gets the Goths out of the main heartland and it turns an enemy into a friend. And the Visigoths never failed Rome afterwards, for the most part. They remain fairly friendly and loyal. So this is kind of the same relationship. So, there might have been the potential for conflict, but Gondor, under very wise statesmanship, gives up those lands and says, it's yours now. Make of it what you will. Build what you will. Do whatever you want. We only ask that, when we call for aid, Rohan should answer. And spoiler alert, Rohan does answer.
It didn't answer. It's a terrible. I did not see that coming in the books, and I was like, "What? Oh wow, okay." They just left him to rot, and then Evil won, and it was a much shorter book.
Yeah. But
okay,
Gandalf, of course, swipes a ride and doesn't even pay the car insurance. I mean, the horse insurance.
Yeah, so we get Shadowfax in here, which is a very interesting bit of lore. So what we have, when he describes Shadowfax, true indeed, said Gandalf, there is one among them that might have been foaled in the morning of the world. The horses of the Nine cannot vie with him. Tireless, swift as the flowing wind. Shadowfax, they called him. By day, his coat glistens like silver. By night, it is like a shade, and he passes unseen. Light is his footfall. Never before had any man mounted him, but I took him, and I tamed him, and so speedily he bore me that I reached the Shire when Frodo was in the Barrow Downs, though I set out from Rohan only when he set out from Hobbiton. So we get introduced to Shadowfax, who we're going to, obviously, is Gandalf's steed through the books. Interesting, we get it through some of the other sources, we can kind of piece together a little bit about Shadowfax's heritage and then Shadowfax's ultimate destiny. So in the appendices, we get this little bit of verbiage, actually talking about the field of Celebrant and the Aotheods rescuing Gondor. It was upon Faleroth that Eorl rode to the field of Celebrant. For that horse proved as long-lived as men, and so were his descendants. These were the Maeras, that would bear no one but the king of the Mark or his sons until the time of Shadowfax. Men said of them that Bema, whom the Eldar called Orome, must have brought their sire from west over sea. So we get the idea that the Maeras are horses originally from Aman. Orome is the hunter Vala, and he rides a horse Nahar. We don't know for a fact, but I would guess that the Maeros are some kind of lineage of that horse, if I had to guess. We get another line that kind of shows that that's showing the connective tissue there. In the Silmarillion, we get the line that says, to Fingon was assigned Dorloman, that lay to the west of the mountains of Mithrim, and their cavalry rode upon that plain, even to the shadow of Thangorodrim. For from few, their horses had increased swiftly. Of those horses, many of the sires came from Valinor, and they were given to Fingolfin by Maedhros in atonement for his losses, for they had been carried by ship to Losgar. So that's first age, but I think those horses, the Noldor brought them over. Maedhros gives them to Fingolfin as basically, hey, sorry you had to walk across the ice and lose so many people. And those horses become the Maeros, and that lineage leads all the way down to Shadowfax. What we then get, as far as the Shadowfax's destiny, is we get the line, again, spoiler alert, Return of the King. Then Círdan led them to the havens, and there was a white ship waiting. And upon the quay, beside a great gray horse, stood a figure robed all in white, awaiting them. And then that's Gandalf, and that's obviously Shadowfax. I believe we were saying is Shadowfax is on the ship that takes Gandalf and company to the west. So Shadowfax actually managed to return to the west at the end of this tale, which is pretty awesome.
Neat.
There you go. Shadowfax info.
Yep. And that covers the entire next few pages.
And that's the story. Anyway, that's the Lord of the Rings, everybody. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Next time we'll be covering some Conan the Barbarian.
Or Conan the Barbarian. I'm game to cover that with you anytime.
All right.
But I was going to say real quick, I forgot to mention this, but Maedhros did nothing wrong except for the one little Doriath massacre, and maybe one other massacre. But he mostly did nothing wrong. But
massacres
if you're actually, I'm going to talk about him a little bit later. But just to say, of the sons of Feanor, he's maybe the most
cool.
Morally complex.
Yeah.
Put it that way. But he certainly had some villainous tendencies.
Well, sort of. One of the plot threads Eleanor and I have been exploring is that in our book club of the Silmarillion is that in a way we can maybe look at it as after the union of Maedhros fails, he maybe has a bit of a breakdown. And he doesn't have the resolve anymore to resist the oath or Curufin and Celegorm because he's too tired and broken. Because he's lost everything. He's been humiliated. He's been destroyed as a man. So we should maybe look at him as a bit of a pitiful figure after that point.
I did a video on Maedhros if people are interested. And so I kind of addressed that notion of, anyway, but right. Joe got it here. He committed fewer murders than his brothers. That's a good way to say it. Yes, in that family, it does count as a compliment. He thought twice before killing kids. He's like, okay, maybe we won't. That. Yes, he did try to form a bond back with Fingolfin's family, and so they united. And so there's a lot. Yeah, again, you could put some in the good column, and you could put some in the bad column.
But the thing with Vale, I don't think he was thinking of weaponizing the Silmaril. I think he was just thinking of his oath.
And that's what I'm going to talk about as we get to what to do with the ring. I think that there's a parallel to Maedhros dealing with the Silmaril. But okay, we'll get to that.
And yes, our friend Melkor did have terrible, if subtle, influence over Feanor.
Good call. Yeah.
But the other thing, real quick, because I forgot to mention this, I do think, despite my criticism of that, we gave them by Boromir, which is a little snobbish. I think, on the other hand, there's a nobility there to Boromir and to the fact that oftentimes, well, the Jackson movies did not do him credit, him or Denethor to an extent, but especially Boromir, because Boromir, he admires the Rohirrim. He thinks they're noble and beautiful.
Well, the fact that he stands up to this council as strongly as he does in that moment to say that, what's the actual line?
And
he says, where did I lose it?
There's also that whole meme about Denethor going like, Boromir would have found someone who could cook, with the whole Faramir Eowyn thing. But I don't think Denethor would have approved of Eowyn for his son, but I think Boromir is someone who, because he has such a profound love for the Rohirrim and an admiration for them.
I mean, he gives no, he doesn't waffle in his defense of the Rohirrim in that moment.
Oh yeah.
I will swear it's a lie that comes from the enemy. I know the men of Rohan, true and valiant, are allies. So he's not saying, "Hey, that's news to me if it's true." He's like, "No, you guys are wrong."
When I first read,
yeah.
When I first read that scene in when I was 26, I had the mental image of him almost jumping to his feet and pointing his finger at Aragorn, like, "How dare you!"
Gwaihir's deep Mordor propaganda. It's true. Yeah. It's true. Gwaihir's been he's been on social media too much. Like, oh, I believe it. Look, it's got so many likes. It's true. The Rohirrim have betrayed us all.
But the thing, like I said, is it's just this is a positive moment for Boromir. I don't know. I really like Boromir.
For sure. No, there's a lot to like about Boromir. And I did a video about him and how when the first time, that first reading I had when I was 12, I was like, that guy's the villain. Look, he tried to get the ring. Blah, 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 blah. I was wrong. 12-year-old me was wrong. That guy is a tragic hero. He is a tragic hero and
a true
in the best
hero.
Sense. Yeah.
Like a very true
he's there's a lot of sadness to it, and he's trying to do the right thing, and
What's interesting is that the two scenes that stuck out to me when I was about 12, when I saw the movies, I didn't really like the movies, but the two scenes that really stood out to me was Boromir telling Aragorn, like, let them mourn for a moment, for pity's sake.
Yeah.
And I had the thought, because Aragorn has no emotions throughout those movies, except to pity himself, I remember just thinking, this man's not a man. I had disdain for him and whatnot, and I actually despised him.
You're killing me, brothers.
You tell him, Boromir. But as an adult, when I read the book, I went, wow, Aragorn's just the coolest guy ever. He's awesome. He's I love this guy. But the thing with Boromir, the other thing that stood out to me was, at 12 years old, was him shouting to Frodo, "I'm sorry, Frodo. Frodo, come back!" Like that entire scene where, what stood out to me was that he was maybe I thought he was a more sympathetic guy and whatnot. And what's funny, I think it's also that I was influenced by the fact that Sean Bean, if you remove the English accent, if you were to slightly francisize and Canadianize it, would probably have, our dad would have almost the same voice. So they had a voice that sounded a lot like each other's, actually almost down to the same timbre and whatnot. But in the same mannerism.
So you're saying you see.
I saw a bit of my dad in there. So at 12, and because at 12 my dad was my hero, it's kind of I like him because he reminds me of Dad. And
nothing wrong with that. Well, Shelby mentioned liked your thoughts about would Denethor ever approve of Eowyn?
No,
her thought is would say no,
because Faramir could not do anything right with him, and it's Boromir. There's a term Dan once said, which was there's every child is either a mama's child, a daddy's child, or in some cases, an elder sibling's child. Where you're closer to your elder sibling than you are.
Who is your mentor?
Your parental figure. Where sometimes the eldest sibling becomes the mentor or the parental figure to the younger ones. And in the case of Faramir, he's not Daddy's boy, but he's Boromir's boy, and that this means that in some ways Boromir is closer to Faramir than Denethor, because there's that almost parental bond between the two. And I wonder if there's a bit of an age gap between Boromir and Faramir to explain this. But even if there isn't, sometimes this does happen.
Well, he's certainly a younger brother.
We also got to bear in mind
exactly how much younger, but yeah.
Yeah, but we also got to bear in mind Denethor was always busy with work as a steward. So the education of Boromir and Faramir would have been left in a lot of other people's hands in a lot of cases. And Boromir probably would have been more involved with Faramir's life. So there's a close-knit bond. And with, like Boromir, I guess you could say he's a Rohirrim-phile.
Okay. All right. I like Eric. Welcome, Eric.
But I'd also argue Faramir maybe chasing after Eowyn in some ways might be him seeking Boromir's approval. In a purely Freudian sense, in that, his brother probably would have wanted to marry a Rohirric lady. So this is kind of him still seeking his elder brother's approval post-mortem. I don't mean that to sound creepy, but it's actually, I think, something very beautiful in a way. And it's interesting that Tolkien weaves these threads together, if subtly so. And they're part Gondorian, but probably not pure Numenorian enough for Denethor's taste. Yeah, that's very true. Now we come to the discussion of Bombadil and
the ring debate.
Yeah, and we get the discussion about Tom Bombadil to whether or not leave the ring.
So it seems like it's Aristor, one of the counselors of Elrond, is kind of the chief. Whatever I want to say, the person pushing the idea of, hey, maybe the ring should go to Bombadil, which isn't on its face a terrible idea, but Gandalf's going to point out why that's not going to work.
Yeah, and Glorfindel's like, well, we could send the ring to him. No, wait, it's not Gandalf. It's not Glorfindel. But Glorfindel is the one who points out to send the ring to him would only postpone the day of evil. Like Glorfindel is very practical. He's like, it's not a solution. It's just going to delay things.
Well, okay, that's an interesting point too, because Gandalf brings that up where he says, well, they're talking about all the different possibilities, and Gandalf says, talk about, sorry, wait, back it up just a second. Glorfindel says, "Let us cast it into the deeps, and so make the lies of Saruman come true. For it is clear now that even at the council, his feet were already on a crooked path. He knew that the ring was not lost forever, but wished us to think so, for he began to lust it for himself. Yet oft in lies, truth is hidden. In the sea, it would be safe." And Gandalf responds, "Not safe forever. There are many things in the deep waters, and seas and lands may change, and it is not our part here to take thought only for a season, or for a few lives of men, or for a passing age of the world. We should seek a final end to this menace, even if we do not hope to make one." And that's a huge response, because in my mind, that this is one of the this recommendation is the one I probably would have taken. If I'm sitting at the council, I probably would have been like, yeah, I kind of like the idea of throwing it in the sea, because it does, as he says, it might work for an entire age of the world. You might be getting rid of the ring for a few thousand years. Now, as it turns out, story-wise, they still would have been crushed by Sauron without the ring. They needed to destroy the ring. They don't know that at this time. But
what's funny about this idea is that this is actually brought up in a bit of a council scene in Hour of the Dragon about the Heart of Ahriman, which is the great artifact in there, where cast it into the sea. But apparently it would float back up to the surface and to the shore and find its way back to, back to possibly the Dark Lord, his Altotomb. So like the same situation.
Well, and since this is where I was going to bring up the parallel. So we've got Glorfindel, and he's not the only one. I think Galdor, I think that's mainly Glorfindel, brings up the idea of throwing it into the sea. And then obviously, ultimately, they're going to decide, no, we have to throw it into Mount Doom.
Yeah, and we're not doing a Maglor. We're doing a Mathros.
Right, exactly my point. So the Silmarils, from the Silmarillion, we get Maglor and Mithras, each with the Silmaril. The third one's up in the sky, and they had this awesome debate, an ethical debate about whether they should keep them or not. And ultimately, Mithras kind of outweighs Maglor and says, "Look, we're damned either way. We're keeping these," or we're not giving them up. And so it says, each of them took to himself, this is Mithras and Maglor, each of them took to himself a Silmaril, for they said, since one is lost to us, and but two remain, and we two alone of our brothers, so it is plain that fate would have us share the heirlooms of our father. But the jewel burned the hand of Mithras in pain unbearable, and he perceived that it was as Ayanwe had said, and that his right thereto had become void, and that the oath was vain. And being in anguish and despair, he cast himself into a gaping chasm filled with fire, and so ended. And the Silmaril that he bore was taken into the bosom of the earth. And it is told of Maglor that he could not endure the pain with which the Silmaril tormented him, and he cast it at last into the sea. And thereafter he wandered ever upon the shore, singing in pain and regret beside the waves. For Maglor was mighty among the singers of old, so on and so forth. And thus it came to pass that the Silmarils found their long homes, one in the airs of heaven, one in the fires of the heart of the world, and one in the deep waters. And it is such a seeming dead-on parallel to what they're talking about here. Ways to get rid of the ring sound very similar to how the Silmarils were distributed at the end of the first stage. So yeah, cool parallel there.
Yep. And the interesting thing is also that now Gandalf ends up kind of telling them, oh, that won't work. That's basically his job here. He's just telling them what will and will not work. But along the way, we find also, I want to note, because I skipped a page too far ahead earlier, Bombadil's names. We have Iarwain Benadar, and we have, as one name, an Orald by Northern Men.
Right, so the Iarwain Benadar is the oldest and fatherless, suggesting how how ancient a being Tom Bombadil is.
Yeah. And
well, I guess while you're on that, so Gandalf's reasoning why Bombadil is a bad idea is not because Tom Bombadil would take the ring and be corrupted by it, and or whatever.
No, it would just be a single point of light that grows smaller and smaller.
He says if all the free folk of the world begged him, he might do so, but he would not understand the need. And if he were given the ring, he would soon forget it, or most likely throw it away. Such things have no hold on his mind. He would be a most unsafe guardian, and that alone is answer enough. So yeah it's like he's so far removed from the idea that of what the ring presents that it's only important to him because somebody told him it's important to him. It's not. He doesn't get it, and so over time he'd be like, "Oh, whatever. I don't know where did I put that ring? It's in that box, I think." Yeah, he would lose track of it because it wouldn't be that crucial to him to guard it with his life.
Yeah, and let's see my notes. And we have around page, let's see. Of course, we've got Boromir who says that because Galdor comments on how, Gondor is waning, Boromir pipes up, Gondor wanes, you say, but Gondor stands. And even the end of its strength is still very strong. But Galdor responds with, and yet its vigilance can no longer keep back the 9. So we're starting to get a bit of an argument here. I don't think this is really a friendly debate anymore. I think that they're starting to argue actively. And because I don't imagine Boromir, like I may have a soft spot for him, but I don't think he does anything by halves. So he's probably not debating. Him and Galdor are probably bickering. And Gandalf and Elrond are basically weighing in, trying to guide things back, and even Glorfindel, guide things back to reason and down a wiser path.
Well, there's that line then that it's an Elrond. Elrond says replies to Boromir to say, his response to, hey, we're not going to use the ring to try to get victory with it, is he says,
we cannot use the ring.
Yeah, its strength, Boromir, is too great for anyone to wield at will, save only those who already have a great power of their own. But for them, it holds an even deadlier peril. The very desire of it corrupts the heart. Consider Saruman. If any of the wise should with this ring overthrow the Lord of Mordor using his own arts, he would set himself on Sauron's throne, and yet another Dark Lord would appear. And that is that's confirmed by a letter Tolkien wrote. I don't have that one. I should have gotten a quote from that one. But he describes how did he put it? He described the idea of Gandalf putting on the ring as Gandalf being basically somebody that's sanctimonious, almost to the point of just overbearingly so, and becomes a Dark Lord in his own way, his own particular twisted form of his own morality. So, anyway.
Well, he basically become like Mother Gothel from Tangled.
Farewell, Shelby. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Bonsoir, madame. Au revoir. He'd basically become like Mother Gothel from that movie, except he'd be singing "Daddy Knows Best," not "Mommy Knows Best." But I think this also falls in with Lewis's philosophy that I think it was Lewis who said that the nosy busybodies are far crueler and capable of cruelty than the robber barons of old. And that's what Gandalf would become. Not a robber baron, I mean, but like the nosy busybody.
I think the verbiage that Tolkien used in his letter was self-righteous. That he would be, he wouldn't just be righteous, he would turn righteousness into self-righteousness.
Yeah, which is always a danger.
Anyway, so yeah.
Always a danger. And I think that another interesting thing is that around page...
Oh, right. Ale just brought that up. Thank you, Ale. You're absolutely right. Thank you. I should have looked at the chat. The chat knows all.
Yeah, it knows all. It's the second most knowledgeable resource we have after Fredegar, who's just grown into such a Gary Stew now. I'm just kidding.
They should also pay heed to the advice of Bomber.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Bomber's advice always ended in disaster. But maybe it's about the application. They were just not applying it right.
Exactly.
It's not Bomber who was at fault then. It was everyone else because they didn't do it right.
So we get our various, everybody has their input of info, and then Elrond kind of sums it up to say, like, all right, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, and there's another thing here, real quick. It's during the moment of silence on page 267 where, you've got Boromir steers and Frodo looks at him, and you have Boromir who starts fingering his great war horn. It seems like this is a bit of a nervous action, and it's also a callback to the Chanson de Roland, or Geste Roland, where the great hero in there has a war horn. He blows, it blows, and it resonates across a great mountain to Charlemagne. But because I know both Theoden and Boromir kind of draw inspiration from Roland. Just a little fun fact.
Okay, nice.
And I took this on this read through as a bit of, like looking at Boromir fingering his war horn. It made me think of Theoden later when he blows his horn. And so, but there's a bit of a link between the two in that sense, I guess. And they both die in battle, nobly and heroically, and grandly.
Horn of Gondor.
Yeah. And
Boromir.
And of course we've got we covered that.
So Elrond basically sums up the strategy as saying
gotta chalk the ring down the mountain.
Yeah, so he says, he's talking about Sauron, and he says it's kind of a fun little, Elrond knows a bit about Sauron's character. So he says, for he is very wise, weighs all things to a nicety in the scales of his malice. But the only measure that he knows is desire. desire for power. And so he judges all hearts. Into his heart, the thought will not enter that any will refuse it, that having the ring, we may seek to destroy it. And so, he's basically saying that's the one thing that he wouldn't consider, that somebody might have the ring and go, yeah, we should destroy this instead of using it.
And here's another thing that people often forget. Elrond met Sauron, at least as an enemy, a few times. Not just once, but several times. So in a lot of ways, he's the person present who knows Sauron the best.
And you get the line right after that where he says, "For nothing is evil in the beginning, even Sauron was not so." Also suggesting this knowledge of Sauron's history.
Well, he would have had access to it. Same with Gandalf on that front.
Yeah.
But in Elrond's case, he'd know it through probably the likes of Maethros and Maglor.
The idea that Sauron was, essentially became a follower of what turned out to be Morgoth, and was, by that following became corrupted. You get this. Some people will point to Sauron after the War of Wrath. So that end of the First Age, we get a line from the Silmarillion that says, when Thengaradrim was broken and Morgoth overthrown, Sauron put on his fair hue again and did obeisance to Eonwë, the herald of Manwë, and abjured to all his evil deeds. And some hold that this was not at first falsely done, but that Sauron had truly repented, if only out of fear. And then it says, then Sauron was ashamed, and he was unwilling to return to humiliation and to receive from a Valar a sentence. Therefore, when Eonwë departed, he hid himself in Middle-earth, and he fell back into evil, for the bonds that Morgoth had laid upon him were very strong. So there, I don't think he ever really was like, I'm a good guy. I mean, I think the nothing is evil in the beginning, even Sauron was not so. I don't think that line is referring to this moment, because even it says he fell back into evil, suggesting he'd done a lot of evil things. He was an evil guy. In this moment, he repented, but basically because he was in fear of getting a worse punishment if he didn't repent. And so I think the nothing is evil in the beginning is a reference to the very beginning, when he was just a simple Maya spirit before he made his decision to follow Melkor. But anyway, just that thought. Yep.
And of course, Gloin kind of complains about nabbing a ring, that the seven are lost to the dwarves. And of course, Gandalf, not Gandalf, Elrond starts to get a little irritable and just says, "Did you not hear me, Gloin? The three were not made by Sauron, nor did he ever touch them. But of them," and this is in reference to the Elf Lord rings, I should specify, "but of them it is not permitted to speak, so much only in this hour of doubt I may now say, they are not idle, but they were not made as weapons of war or conquest. That is not their power. Those who made them did not desire strength or domination or hoarded wealth, but understanding, making, and healing to preserve all things unstained." And this shows a very different vision and view between the dwarves and the elves. But we also got to remember that the three rings were never touched by Sauron, whereas the dwarf rings were tainted by him.
It basically, Celebrimbor used the recipe. He was given a recipe essentially by Sauron, and so he used that recipe and he made the rings, but Sauron didn't actually, it wasn't involved in that process. But because he used that recipe, they're connected to the one ring in that way.
Yeah, but now I can't help but think of Celebrimbor with a chef's hat.
He's got a chef's hat on. Kind of.
And maybe
alchemical chef.
Well,
but that's where I was just pointing out earlier, the fact that Glowin's asking, "Hey, why don't we use these rings?" And Elrond says, it's not permitted to speak about them. And they're literally, two of the three are right there. They're literally, like, Glowin could reach out and touch both of them if he really, like, oh, you mean right there? So it's great. It's great. Yeah, I don't know where they are. We can't talk about them anyway. Blah, 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 blah. Next topic.
Yeah. And the thing is, and honestly, to an extent, the rings are useless in comparison to the power of the Force. I mean, Glorfindel, who, like we know, is more powerful than all three of them, like Gandalf right now, before he's Gandalf the White, put together. So it's one of those things where if you really want to put your faith in someone with a lot of physical might or something, or mystical might, Glorfindel.
Yep.
Why would you rely on Elrond and Galadriel? That being said, I wonder, yeah, those rings preserved and whatnot, but given the decline of the elves, I wonder if we shouldn't maybe comment that Elrond and Galadriel have kind of declined as well. So that Elrond, for example, would not be able to mount the kind of fight he once could against Sauron.
Well, there's that idea of like the marring of Arda, that Morgoth put this stain on all things in Middle-earth that over time, over a long time, thousands and thousands and thousands of years, the elves are gradually diminishing. It's not like tomorrow they're going to disappear or anything, but so there is yes, they are diminishing over time.
Yeah. And maybe the rings, while they helped preserve Rivendell and Lothlorien, maybe they also helped preserve Galadriel and Elrond. But to overexert themselves would probably start to diminish them even faster. So
yeah, and I think there's like they're trying to also create in Rivendell and Lothlorien these little havens that remind. Well, Elrond wasn't in the West, but that remind them of the greatness of the West.
Well,
trying to recapture it somehow here.
I'll debate the point in a way to an extent and say that I think that Galadriel, for her part, is maybe trying to it's more reminiscent in a way of Doriath, and Elrond it is as well to an extent, because we got to bear in mind he plays a bit of the Thingolian role to Arwen's Tenuviel and Aragorn's Baron. So I kind of think it's more reminiscent of Doriath, but even Doriath is a lesser of Valinor, as well. Even you, I think, have rightly pointed out once or twice. But as to let's see.
Yeah, pointing out Sauron's evil deeds here. I would also add not just the treatment of Celebrimbor, Finrod, but also Gorlim, which he was one of the followers there with Baron and company, and Sauron just tortured the hell out of him. Anyway, yep, terrible person, terrible creature, entity, I should say.
Yep. He was a very, very naughty boy. As Brian from Life of Brian's mom would put it.
I like the line here. So Frodo finally does the great line with the "I will take the ring, though I do not know the way."
Well, that's after Bilbo.
That's true. Bilbo steps up. All right,
I'll do it.
Time for me to get to work.
It's what is it? It's it could be Bilbo's finest hour, and everybody goes, no.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, yeah, no.
Okay, old man. Go back to your drink. But yeah.
Yep, basically. Well, or your book. Yeah. And then Frodo has a beautiful moment where he steps up.
Another great quote. There's a series I mentioned, the one with those who break something in order to understand it, have lost the path of wisdom. This is another one. I'll take the ring, though I do not know the way. Great.
But that's also a good reference to not all those who wander are lost.
Yep. For sure.
And that's Frodo in a nutshell. He might wander, but he's not lost. Same with Gandalf and Aragorn. And
then I love the fact that Elrond puts him in the same grouping as our heroes of old. He says, it is a heavy burden, so heavy that none could lay it on another, and I do not lay it on you. But if you take it freely, I will say that your choice is right. And though all the mighty elf friends of old, Hador, Hurin, and Turin, and Baron himself were assembled together, your seat should be among them. Bang!
Yeah.
That is some high praise.
Or an insult. I mean, Hurin, Turin did kind of.
Well, it depends what you think of Turin, I guess. But you know, anyway.
I'm joking.
I think he's definitely.
No, but it's definitely high
put him,
praise.
the elf friends of old, like bang.
But you know, no pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Great point. Anyway, I'm just saying, if you don't live up to your part, you're going to look pretty silly now that I've put you in this group.
Yeah, which Hador and Hurin were brothers, and they were awesome. Oh, you just really see. Turin is, of course, awesome.
Okay, good call, Joe.
Baron. Don't sit next to Turin. Now, to be fair, Turin in Dagger does kind of live up to everyone's expectations.
Sure, that's that pseudo-canon thing you're talking there, but yep.
Well, I don't consider it pseudo. I consider it full-on canon.
Turin Bar is awesome. Oh, yeah, here we go.
Yep.
Yeah, there are those who are very anti-Turin. I'm not among them. But I will say that he does some jerky things. But then again, it's the curse.
Yeah.
The curse of Morgoth. It's maybe the worst curse in the entire Tolkien pantheon.
It's basically a Greek tragedy or Shakespearean tragedy.
For sure.
But there's also of Turin, we shouldn't just weigh his past deeds against him, but weigh up his future deeds with Dagger.
I got you.
But that's how I see it. Same with Fëanor.
Yep.
We do have to weigh Dagger off, like basically their redemption, over, like with their misdeeds in the past. So, and I think this is how Tolkien would have wanted us to look at these characters.
A redeemed hero.
Yeah, because this is something Tolkien loved.
Okay. All right, Joe. I like it. Frodo and Tuor have something in common. Frodo, as if some other will was using a small voice. Tuor speaks as he arrives in Gandalf, as if some other spoke with his mouth.
Yes, precisely. Right. As the Griffin from Quest for Camelot once said, precisely.
He did take out Glaurung. That's what it took. That's all, it took everything to take out the father of dragons.
Yeah, and that was one of the most important deeds of the First Age. If he hadn't done that, the First Age probably would have been lost.
Technically, Aragorn, Bearer of the Ring of Barahir, though not at the time, gets lots of help from Galadriel, Finrod's sister. I always wondered what she thought the first time she saw her. Oh, good call. Yeah. She was like, wait, that's where it went? I don't know, maybe, because it had a very long, travel from point A to point B for it to end up as something that she probably would recognize it. Be like, it's the ring.
Well, I guess in that case, memory wasn't the first to go in her old age.
Yeah. So you get another line there. Okay, you're right. So it's decided Frodo's going to take this ring. They aren't going to decide yet who exactly is going with him. That's in the next chapter. So because there is actually a delay. We get the idea that like the council meets and then they head out. And that's not true. The council meets, I think I wrote down the dates. The council meets October 25th. The fellowship is chosen on December 18th, and the fellowship leaves Rivendell December 25th. So there's a 2-month gap between the council and them setting off. So there is some split here. Once this council ends, it's more of a, we know what we're doing. We don't exactly know who's going just yet.
And they have to file it past HR, and then they've got a... joking.
That ring is the cause of my brother's death. Throw it into the fires of Mount Doom. Okay, good call.
Yeah. It's like, well, we'll throw 2 rings in.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Which also rhymes with Turin. But there's another thing that happens here that's of note.
Yep.
That you would never see in the Lord of the Rings movies because of Jackson and his staff. I would say being semi-incompetent, and that's said Elrond.
You're killing me on this, Joe. By the way, okay, go ahead.
Said Elrond, turning towards him with a smile. Sorry, It's just Elrond in the movies never smiles.
Oh, okay.
Except for one scene.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome. But the thing is, this is an important point. Elrond, like in The Hobbit, is a whimsy character. And in here, he does smile. He does like show despair at one point. This is just, I just found him.
He's not grumpy old man, in other words.
Yeah, he's not basically the grumpy dwarf from Snow White. And I don't know. I did not like Hugo Weaving as Elrond.
Okay.
He does not look like Elrond should. And
he plays it very grim. I'll say that. I will agree.
Yeah, and I just think that was not the correct choice. You could play him as serious, pensive or something. Like they should have cast someone like Liam Neeson in the role. If only because what I mean is you'd have someone who can play more than just one who can actually portray emotion.
You're saying Hugo, you're not sure that Hugo Weaving could have played
he's a talentless hack.
Okay, I got you. All right. I don't know about that.
Hack.
All right.
He can only play one emotion.
You're throwing Hugo Weaving under the bus. All right.
Yeah.
Under the elven bus.
Yeah. And
the wagon.
Well, which is actually being driven by Frediger. But the thing is, I had to relate it back to Fatty. But it all comes full circle. Always back to Frediger. Kind of like a ring. But anyways.
Like the ring around Orthanc, the ring of Isengard. But yeah, so that line you're mentioning, though, is when Sam steps up. So Sam becomes, in a way, I think, assigned to the Fellowship. He's the first guy assigned. So it's like, but you won't send him off alone, surely, Master, cried Sam, unable to contain himself any longer, jumping up from the corner. No, indeed, said Elrond, turning towards him with a smile. You at least shall go with him. So there it is. There's the first member of the Fellowship is Sam. It is hardly possible to separate you from him, even when he is summoned to a secret council, and you are not. Sam sat down, blushing. A nice pickle we landed ourselves in, Mr. Frodo, shaking his head, and that's the end of the chapter. So it's but yeah. So there's one. There's right now it's a Fellowship of 2.
And there we have Elrond also making a subtle little joking jab.
It's a joke. Things. You're right. It's not a grim statement. He's like, yeah.
It's like, yeah, we can't really separate you two because this was supposed to be a secret council and you just crashed the party.
Good call, Eric. He says, I think Jackson wanted to highlight the disdain the elves have for men. He did change the whole Isildur ring part in the beginning. Definitely changed the Isildur ring part big time. Yeah. Agreed.
What he was borrowing there from was basically 80s elves like Dragonlance, not from Tolkien. And really he ought to have looked to Tolkien, which this is your source material. But the thing is, I've got a lot of criticism I could say about that. But I've already said enough. But the thing
slander. Okay, yeah.
The other thing with Elrond is we get him teasing Bilbo, Sam. It's just even in here, while he does have a grim side, he is trying to at least he's
trying to find something to smile about.
Well, sort of. He's reacting like a human being would, I guess. And it's just like he smiles, he laughs. He's like, oh yeah, fair point. Or like with Bilbo, he's very attached to him, very evidently. And he's very reluctant to let Bilbo go. But while he's reluctant to let the other hobbits go, he acknowledges they have to. And with Sam, he's clearly amused by the fact that Sam was not supposed to be there. He's not a VIP. And yet found his way in. Nobody could keep him out. And I
feel so strongly about Frodo and Frodo's safety and protecting Frodo that he speaks up in this big council which is filled with Middle-earth's heroes, and he steps in to go like, you're certainly not going, without help, right? So yeah, it shows the devotion that Sam has to Frodo and his willingness to just eschew niceties to be like, no, this is what's needed.
And the thing is, we've got like even Aragorn at one point kind of blackpills himself and goes, "Oh my gosh, if Rohan's lost, what chance do we have?"
Right.
And we've got that moment. We've got Boromir says like, "Hey, like don't make me come over there because no one smack talks Rohan." And you've got in turn here Elrond closing out the meeting, just going, "Yeah, you weren't even invited, and you're here." Like, but he clearly is amused.
Well, he's amused because he also assigns him to the Fellowship there, right?
Yeah.
He says, you at least shall go with him. So it's not like, get this guy out of here. We have business to do. He's like, you know what? I'm going to take this as a sign that you probably should be with him.
But is he also punishing him? Because, you know, good
point. Your punishment shall be a long, slow, torturous death on a walk to a volcano.
I couldn't help but think when I read that, like, it's essentially, if Gandalf were to sneeze, Sam said, "Bless you," and then everyone's like, "You weren't supposed to be here."
It's basically something like that. It's like, oh, well, you're not going to send him alone. And it's like, oh my gosh, Sam.
You had to open your big...
Is he hiding under a chair and then he, like, peeks out?
Or maybe behind a curtain.
Yeah, right.
Tapestry.
Hey, that's my cue.
Or the
maybe they should have done it like that in the movie. I don't know.
Or the flower pot.
Oh my gosh, no, he's not doing the Timon and Pumbaa thing of hiding behind a flower like a tree.
I have up right now a picture from the movie, and he's not seated in one of the chairs. So he and Merry and Pippin were hanging out on the side.
Yeah, but he's not like hiding, like his body mass turning into the same as like a tree.
I was thinking behind it.
But yeah, Boromir, he laughed arrogantly about Bilbo. Yeah, and he was put in his place. And he kind of goes, wait, everybody's looking at him with respect. Oh, who is this hobbit? So like we have different characters reacting to each other. And this is such a great chapter for that reason. And
it's so chock full. I mean, we did it in 3 parts, and here we are 2 hours in. Like, we're still talking about this in the 3rd part. It's a lot to take in. There's a lot. It's a very dense chapter.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of memorable quotes. There's a lot of, so much happens. We get so much history. It's so much built into what it turns out to be not that many pages, but woo.
Not that many. It's like 30 pages.
Yeah, just saying. It's it's quality, but yeah, it's dense. But next time we're going to be discussing Book 2, Chapter 3, The Ring Goes South, in which the Fellowship eventually, after 2 months of hanging out in Rivendell, attempts some ill-advised mountain hiking. What else can people find on the Brothers channels, good sirs?
Well, if you're just thinking our YouTube stuff, we've got a YouTube channel, it seems, for everything.
You've diversified. You got a franchise going.
Yeah, basically. Well, actually, you're the second American to tell us that a while back. Or something like that. It's because on Substack we've gotten to like 2,047 subscribers total and about 100 paid subscribers. And what he said was, you have successfully turned Brothers Kryn into a brand. I'm not sure about that. But on the other hand, we do write a lot of essays and whatnot over on our Substack. We wrote one on the Hour of the Dragon the other day, which was awesome. It's the first one I've done in months. So I was really pleased with myself for that.
Eric is suggesting we just go get some pizzas, get a few 6-packs, get through the rest of the book tonight. We're binging it.
No.
Well, maybe. I'm joking.
Mark is asking, wait, 2 months? Maybe Fredegar was hungry. He needed the time to eat through the cuisine of Rivendell. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
They had a buffet.
As for binging it could take us maybe like 7 hours if we don't include everything, but maybe 14 hours. Like kind of like a director's cut or something.
Yeah, director's cut. Yeah, exactly.
But
so you've got a lot of stuff going on. You got a lot of irons in the fire.
Substack, and we've got our book. Well, we've got our Caled Bulk Irish novel, which is like an Irish Hobbit thing, and we've got our darker Crown of Blood, which has been re-released with map, with family trees, and basically,
where's the best place where somebody could find all that info?
The books can be found on Amazon. But as for the Substack, well, you can Google Substack, and once there, you can Google Brothers Kryn, and you'll find our newsletter fairly easily enough. It's got the same kind of bonhomme avatar, basically of a crusader, except over there he's got a French flag rather than a I don't know, whatever flags we usually throw on here, which are usually, I think, Quebecois flags. But yeah,
very good. Back here on Dorklords, I think you also did a video for Tolkien Reading Day, but I did one on Gondolin.
Yeah. Yours was better.
Check it out, Gondolin Before the Fall. And I've gone back now to researching the video I was going to do prior to Tolkien Reading Day, which is on the First Age villain, Lorgan. And in non-Tolkien news, we just dropped a recap of the first 3 episodes of Andor, Season 2. It's a quality show, easily the best writing in Star Wars. If you're interested in knowing about that.
Episodes 1 through 6, there's the Jedi Knight series, and there's KOTOR. Matt.
Okay, and then Andor's better than all of those in terms of its writing. But yes, you're right. Good fight.
No.
Anyway, we're covering that stuff, which is fun. I really enjoy that show. I think Andor is.
We also have to comment that Matt's made the promise to go for Conan down the road now.
I have read some Conan. I would not be anywhere near the expert that you are on that, but
so that means we might be able to lure you for the power of, well, I guess the One Ring here, to lure you into reading Hour of the Dragon and someday doing a book club like this.
I would just, basically my role would just be show how it's like Lord of the Rings. That would be my, everything. I'll just be like, well, that's like Lord of the Rings. That's a parallel to Lord of the Rings.
Well, that's basically what we did that's what we did during our book club with Zero Sum and World of Conan. Wow, that's like this.
That's right. All right, well, cool. Thank you, everyone out there. I love, the community's awesome. Crush your enemies. See them driven before you, Frodo.
And hear the lamentation of their woman, which actually Conan does not say at
what is good in life. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, brothers. You guys are awesome. And we'll see everybody next time. Bye, everybody.